Hello again everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the LatinVFR Airbus A340-300. The aircraft released recently for Microsoft Flight Simulator, and whilst it would be fair to say that LatinVFR don't produce particularly complex or high fidelity add-ons, I do of course have a vested interest in all things Airbus, so I thought we'd take a look at the add-on and see what we find. For our flight here today, we're currently on the ground at Hong Kong's International Airport. We're going to be operating Cathay 406, a Cathay Pacific service from Hong Kong over to Taipei. A nice quick little sector which I believe at one point in time was actually the world's busiest air route. Flight time today will be about 1 hour and 8 minutes. We're going to be cruising our way over at flight level 370. We've got about 230 passengers on board the aircraft, and we've uploaded around 20 tons of Jet A1. As usual, we'll be carrying out a full flight, trying to keep things as realistic as we can within the bounds of the LatinVFR A340. As always, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, then please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. If you'd like to help support the channel further, you can do so as well by becoming a channel member or patron. So this afternoon then, we find ourselves in the cockpit of the LatinVFR A340-300. As you can see, he's currently on stand Echo 4 here at Hong Kong's International Airport, and we find ourselves in a cold and dark aircraft, which is highly unusual. That's going to give us a good opportunity here to run through the startup, which as you'll see will be fairly abbreviated due to the limited level of systems depth available with the add-on. So first things first, coming up to the overhead panel, we'll take the batteries on. And as you can hear, initially pretty nice sound set there from the aircraft. Though the batteries are on, we do have ground power available. Ordinarily we'd take that, but we're going to run the APU here today. So we'll fire that up, that'll just take a few moments. Again, it'll be a very abbreviated setup here, so we'll just run through the pertinent items here on the overhead panel. As you can see, most of the switching and functionality here doesn't work. The ADIRs, we'll take those through to nav. The lighting, we'll take the strobes through to auto, nav lights onto system 1. Seatbelt signs can go on, same there as well for the no smoking signs. The APU is now available, we'll take the APU bleed air on there as well. And we'll take the internal lighting through here to storm, just to brighten things up a little bit internally. The cockpit and cabin temperature selectors, we'll just take those through to the 10 o'clock position. Ground power again we'll leave off. The fuel pumps, we'll take the mains. And the standbys, centre pumps can go on there as well. And same there on the right. Again, pretty limited functionality, for example, no ability there to run through an engine fire test. And just working our way up the right hand side of the overhead, again just checking everything roughly where we want it to be. For the forward panel, again just checking the switching. Just running the mouse over most of the switching here, again it looks mostly inoperative. And down through the centre pedestal, again we're going to find much the same here as we make our way along. The weather radar can go off for the time being. Speed brakes stowed, park brake is set, thrust levers are in the idle position, engine masters are off, engine start selector in the normal position. Just brighten up the rear MCDU here as well, although we're not probably going to be making much use of that today. Down on the right hand side we'll take the transponder through to standby. Altitude reporting can go on. The click spot for that's a little bit hidden there with the flap handle. And you can see there as well no ability there to select the TCAS. It's currently defaulting to TRA, but we can't select above, for example. And a little bit out of sequence here, but we'll just work our way through the EFIS and FCU setup here as well. So we'll take the flight directors on, come on to constraints. We'll leave ourselves an ARC 20, VORs are selected on, and pre-selected 5,000 there on the altitude. Coming down to the MCDU then. Firstly, we have CFM 56 5C4 engines, A340-300. The nav database current through to May the 15th, 24. So we're a little bit out of date, but not by much. Onto the Init A page, we're tracking from Hong Kong, Victor, Hotel, 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 through to Taipei, which is Romeo, Charlie, Tango, Papa. Does take a little bit of time for the aircraft to take it. And we have Hong Kong to Taipei, we'll hit return. For the alternate today, that is Kaohsiung. That's Romeo, Charlie, Kilo, Hotel. For the flight number, we're Cathay Pacific, so Charlie, Papa, Alpha, 406. And the cost index, according to SimBrief, is 37. Cruise flight level is going to be flight level 370. With the RS in it, again, fairly basic functionality here. As best I can tell, you can't actually adjust the aircraft's reference position, but it's pretty close to our GPS position, so we'll just align there on the reference. And for the tropopause altitude, again, according to the planning materials I have in front of me, we're looking at around 50,000 feet. Clicking on that, it doesn't seem as though the aircraft will actually take an adjustment to the tropopause altitude, so we'll clear that out again. Onto the flight plan. This, I have to say, is where the MCDU falls down a little bit short. It does, again, have all of the issues that you'll suffer with the default A320. We'll demonstrate that in just a moment. So, departing out of Hong Kong, we're going to be off 07 right. And the departure today is going to be the Ocean 3 Alpha. So we can insert that. Arrival into Taipei, we're expecting ILS 05 right. And that's going to be the Tonga 1 Alpha arrival. And we'll be coming in via waypoint Jammy. So again, we'll insert that. Okay, so here's the issue that we're really going to have with the MCDU. Currently the default A320 doesn't seem to take airways. Just as a demonstration here, we're tracking out towards waypoint Ocean. According to our flight plan after that, it should be joining onto the Victor 3 airway. As you can see, that's not in database. That seems to be the case with any airway that I've tried, and I gather, having read a few posts down on some of my other videos, that indeed, at the moment, there is an issue with the default Airbus in terms of airways. So we'll clear out Victor 3. Unfortunately, that means it's going to be a little bit arduous, but we're going to have to put in each waypoint individually. As a result, I'm just going to build up a very basic approximation of the flight plan, save a little bit of time. So next waypoint after Ocean will be waypoint Conga. And that's going to be North 21, East 116. After Conga, it will be waypoint NVAR, Echo November, Victor Alpha Romeo. And then from NVAR we'll be joining the Tonga arrival. So we've got NVAR to Tonga, we can insert that. So again, a fairly rough approximation of the flight plan. Starting off 07 right, out towards Ocean, Conga, NVAR and then Tonga, and then joining the Tonga 1 Alpha arrival. Expecting the ILS 05 right. Just running briefly through the waypoints. No ability to program a secondary. The RadNav page as well, not entirely representative of the real world aircraft, but we'll look at that a little bit more later on. For the init-B page, we're looking at a 0 fuel weight for our flight today of 157.2 on the flight plan, 157.0 on the aircraft. It does auto-populate the fields, which is quite nice. The max 0 fuel weight, 38.2. Block fuel, we have 20 tons of fuel on board the aircraft, and that's as per the flight plan. For the performance, the aircraft does come with a takeoff data calculator. Again, fairly basic in terms of its operation, but that has given us some V-speeds. So we have a V1 today, 133, VR of 133, and a V2 of 152. Transition altitude out of Hong Kong going off the chart is 9,000 feet. And it's going to be config 1, and we're looking at up 2.0 on the stab. The aircraft has also auto-calculated a flex temperature. 64 degrees seems pretty high, I've got to say, for an A340 on a hot day here out of somewhere like Hong Kong. But we'll try the default value here, see how we get on. Green dot is 197. According to the chart here, we have an initial speed restriction of 220 knots. That doesn't seem to have been displayed here in the box. We'll just pre-select that. In fact, I'm going to leave that in the default state. I don't entirely trust the aircraft here to do exactly what we want to do. But nevertheless, with our green dot of 197, that does mean we can clean up here on the departure. On the progress page, go Hong Kong, 07 right. And again, another functionality here on the MCDU that doesn't seem to work correctly. As you can see, pretty limited functionality. Again, if you're familiar with the default A320, you'll be very familiar with what you get here. It is enough to get you from A to B. You could probably just about get away with it as well on VATSIM, but it might be quite laborious to set the MCDU up, and certainly I wouldn't trust the aircraft all that much in terms of navigation. Anyway, we'll come back onto the perf page. The LVFR A340 does have the ability to integrate charts into the onboard tablet. I did try setting that up, but for some reason the link isn't working for me. I did activate my charts previously with the A330, so I wonder whether or not there's some sort of conflict there. But either way, we're going to have to make do today with paper charts, so we'll run through the briefing. Again, we're expecting an Ocean 3 Alpha RNAV departure. Let's plate 10-3 Kilo. It is an RNAV SID. We do have GPS primary. Initially departing out towards waypoint Pauper. Again, we've got a speed restriction of 220 knots until the Tango Delta VOR. After that, tracking out towards waypoint Ocean to pick up the rest of the flight plan. The stop height initially on the chart is 5,000 feet. We've got that pre-selected already on the FCU. And as we discussed, the transition altitude 9,000 feet. Aerodrome elevation 28 feet. There is fairly high terrain around Hong Kong. We've got high terrain out to the south and the northeast of us. The MSA is 4,300 feet. Weather-wise, as you've seen already, a very pleasant day. Pretty light winds, temperatures around 28 degrees. QNH currently 1026. Decent conditions both here, and it'll be the same later on into Taipei. Later on, in terms of the taxi, we're going to be pushing back here off Echo 4. Most likely we'll join right onto Juliet, and we'll take Juliet down, probably departing off either Juliet 2 or Juliet 1, runway 07 right. So again, a fairly abbreviated setup here, but that's really the only level of depth that the LVFR A340 will afford you. That's not necessarily a criticism, I think that's just the level of depth that the developer is looking to offer. And once more, as I'm sure I'll highlight a couple of times throughout this review, I think the aircraft is targeted at a very specific user, not somebody who's looking for quote-unquote study level. Certainly if that's your sort of thing, you'll be much better off with the Phoenix A320. Anyway, that's it in terms of the setup for now. We've got to get the passengers on board, still loading up the catering and the cargo as well, as you may have seen. Whilst we're waiting on that, we'll take a brief wander through the cabin, and then we'll come back for our final items here, ahead of the push and start.
Because your safety is important to us, please take a few minutes to watch our video.
由而家開始，我哋會展開一段舒適、稱心嘅飛行旅程。請用幾分鐘留意呢段短片，因為你嘅安全對我哋嚟講係好重要。
If you're traveling with hand luggage or large items, make sure they're stored in the overhead compartments for takeoff and landing.
如果你有隨身攜帶手提行李或大型物件，喺航機起飛同降落前，請確保放喺行李櫃裡面。
Please ensure that personal electronic devices are switched off or set to airplane mode. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi function can be used throughout the flight. Use of radios and transmitters is not allowed. If any electronic devices become trapped in your seat, please don't adjust your seat and ask our crew to help you.
請將電子用品關掉，或調校到飛行模式。除無線上網及藍牙功能外，機艙內任何時候都唔可以使用無線電傳送設備。如果有任何電子產品攝咗喺座位裡面，請唔好擅自調校座位，並通知我哋嘅機艙服務員。
You can place any small items underneath the seat in front of you.
你可以將細件嘅物件放喺前面嘅座位。
Okay, so back from the cabin, the door's now closed up. We've just retracted the last of the jet bridges here as well. Aircraft setup is complete. We'll run through the before start checklist here in its entirety. We are now cleared for the push and start. Though the cockpit preparation is complete, gear pins and covers have been removed. Signs are on and auto, ADIS are set through to nav. Fuel quantity, we have 19.9, 20 tons on board the jet. That is per the flight plan, the fuel is balanced. Just come back onto the doors page for now. Takeoff data is set to the barrier ref. We have a QNH of 1026. That is the before start checklist down to the line. The tug just connecting, we'll take the park brake off. And below the line, windows and doors are closed, beacon can go on. Thrust levers are idle. Park brake is off. We'll take the transponder here through to auto. And that is the before start checklist complete. So as discussed, we are clear for the start. The engine start selector can go through to ignition start, and we'll just wait here on the push before we start the engines. If memory serves me correctly, you can actually start 2 engines at a time on the 340. We just need to wait for each engine here to come through 10% on the NT before we start the subsequent engine. Okay, there goes the push, so engine 1 starts. You notice as well here on the modelling for the thrust levers, a bit of an offset there in the reverse thrust selectors. So some fairly scrappy modelling there in the cockpit, pretty obvious feature. We are up through 10% there on the number 1, so engine 2 starts. Okay, so we do now have 4 good starts. The tug is clear. Enter start selector can go back through to normal. Ordinarily we'd start the chrono, but that's not currently functional on the aircraft. Something I pointed out as well with the LVFR A330. That's a pretty simple function to implement, so it would have been nice to have seen. Anyway, the APU can come off. And down to the centre pedestal, we'll reset the rudder trim. Arm up the spoilers, flaps can go through to 1. And for the stab trim, we're looking for up 2.0.
Radar, hello, Cathay 80, descending flight level 260, been assigned a speed of 300 knots.
The THS is set. The doors page, the slides are armed. Status is normal. And ordinarily here, some of the ECAM pages do switch across when using the appropriate system. So for example, starting up the APU page will come up. Same as well for various other pages. The flight control page though doesn't seem to be one of those pages. So we'll just carry out the flight control check here whilst we're stationary. So we're full up, pull down, and neutral, pull left, pull right, and neutral, and on the rudder, pull left, pull right, and neutral. You'll notice as well here the screens are a little bit dim, again something I noticed on the A330, although the situation has been a little bit improved since I reviewed that aircraft. Nevertheless, a little bit tricky to read, and needless to say, quite a lot of the fonts here are incorrect in terms of the font themselves, so the sizing of the imaging as well. Similarly, on the ECAM you can't actually cancel the push button itself, you have to cycle through the pages. If you want to bring up the cruise page, you just have to cycle through using all. We'll leave that up for now. We'll take the engine page here for the takeoff. So for the after start checks, the anti-ice is off, ECAM status is checked. Pitch trim we have up 2.0, rudder trim is 0. That is the after start check is complete. As discussed, we're going to be making a right turn here out on Juliet, to join on to Juliet, taking ourselves down to Juliet 2. We'll take the runway turn-off lights on, nose light through to taxi. You do have to be a little bit careful here as well with the runway turn-off lights. The click spot there seems to interfere as well with the captain's windshield shade. So the park brake is off. And we'll just bring in a little bit of thrust here to help get our 340 on the move. One thing I have noticed with the aircraft, the nose wheel steering seems to be lacking a little bit in terms of range. It's really hard to get the aircraft through a turn at times. This is a fairly acute turn to be fair, but I find often you need a little bit of brake to sharpen up the turn, which is just not realistic. And again, a lot of what I'm saying here is not intended to be direct criticism of the product per se, it's just to give you the best idea as possible as to the level of depth that you're actually going to get here with the A340. Just versus the real world aircraft for the sake of interest.
Flight level 170, Cathay 780.
So coming around the corner, ideally we want to overshoot the turn here slightly. The nose wheel's fairly far behind us. And at the moment I've got full right rudder, so full right here on the nose wheel steering. And again having to use a little bit of brake here to tighten up the turn.
Korea 828, proceed to skate and resume on navigation.
Those sorts of things, they're the sorts of issues that really you do need to see fixed up on a product. It does make use of the aircraft that little bit more difficult, and it's not hard to make such features more realistic, I wouldn't imagine. So just about getting the aircraft through the turn. As I say, in terms of taxi then, continuing on Juliet, that's straight ahead, and down to the other end of runway 07 right for holding point Juliet 2.
Cathay 157, cancel speed restriction, maintain 90,000 feet traffic crossing above for beam Tango Delta.
Speed and copy the restriction, Cathay 157.
Saitek 5530 Hong Kong radar, expect ILS Zulu runway 34, information Mike, descent unrestricted, 9,000 feet QNH 1006.
Okay, so continuing down Juliet, again we're going for holding point Juliet 2. In terms of the takeoff briefing, again it's going to be the Ocean 3 Alpha departure off runway 07 right, tracking straight ahead initially, your right turn. On the PFD there we have climb nav blue 5000, 1FD2. If we want to take the terrain on the ND, that's on both sides, so we'll leave that off for now. Auto brake can go through to max, we'll carry out a takeoff config test. And as well here we can select the weather radar on. Presume using the default Microsoft Flight Simulator API, which is at least something.
China Eastern 5018, confirm 3 miles right of track.
Takeoff.
We're going to disregard the windsock there, that's showing a little bit of a tailwind off 07 right, but the real world conditions today actually favour 07. I think that windsock probably suffering the bug in the sim where you get the animation there through 180 degrees.
China Eastern 5018 approved.
So we've got Juliet 2 just off on the left. Looks like we've got an aircraft there on short final, so we'll hold short. And onto the brakes. Just enough room here to get ourselves lined up down at the holding point.
Jennifer level 130, speed 30 knots, running low 605.
Cathay 780, factors for short delay, turn right heading 040, speed 230 knots.
So we'll get ourselves into position, we'll get the park brake on, run through the before takeoff checklist.
30, I just confirmed the heading right turn, heading 040.
Cathay 780, AFM.
Park brake set. The before takeoff checklist then, the flight controls have been checked, flight instruments are checked, briefing is confirmed. The flap setting, we have config 1+F. V-speeds and thrust, we have V1 133, VR 133, V2 152. And a flex of 64 degrees. ATC is set, ECAM memo, just the auto brake there again. Well, we'd already selected that, but we have takeoff no blue. That is the before takeoff checklist down to the line. In terms of that landing traffic, looks like he is now clear. He's just touched down, so we'll assume we've been cleared to line up. Take the strobe lights on. And just to make things a little bit easier for ourselves here, we'll take the landing lights and the nose light through to takeoff. Park brake is off. The before takeoff checklist below the line, the cabin crew have been advised engine mode selector is normal. Packs are on. That is the before takeoff checklist complete.
We're ready for level 26 strobe impact to China Eastern 503.
Radar for that 32A 1165 to flight level 25, passing 162.
0116 Hong Kong radar, climb to flight level 330.
Climb to level 330,
So again, having to use a little bit of braking here to get ourselves around the corner, lined up on the runway centre line. That wasn't even a particularly acute turn, I would say.
Cathay 740, contact approach 119, decimal 1, can I?
9.1, Cathay S1045.
So holding now in position, just waiting for the traffic ahead of us to clear the runway. Looks like he's vacating off to the left. As soon as he's clear, we'll assume we've been clear for the takeoff.
VHHH 5530, we're enable right heading 040.
Okay, he's just vacated, so again, through to 50% initially, allowing the engines to stabilise. And take off. So coming all the way through to the flex detent, a little bit hard to gauge on the add-on. There's no noise here for the detent itself. We'll just see things on the FMA. Okay, so we have man flex 64. No SRS, which we should see. We do have runway. And also thrust blue. Easing back there on the stick. The nose wanting to come up of its own accord. We saw that as well on the LVFR A330. That's inaccurate. Up through V1. And conversely there, the aircraft actually feeling quite heavy in rotation after that initial pitch up. Anyway, we do have a positive climb. Take the gear up. Pitching initially for around 15 degrees. We do now have SRS there as well on the FMA. So we'll pitch up to maintain the speed. 20 degrees nose up is pretty high. And we'll follow the flight directors here as well for the right turn. I don't think that's coded quite correctly for the departure, but nevertheless, again, default aircraft, default systems. Get through acceleration altitude, we'll get the nose down. Coming back to climb thrust, so we have thrust climb, climb, auto thrust. Nav's in blue there, it should be in green. We are up through S speed, so we'll go through to flap 0.
VHHH 5530, if able, maintain speed to 80 knots or greater.
And we should get a pretty nice view of the city here as well as we depart out of Hong Kong International. You can see all of the islands down below us. So 220 knots for that initial speed restriction. Looks like the aircraft's targeting 250. We'll take the autopilot in. We now have nav. Again, we should have already been in nav there despite the manual flying.
For Mike current, descend unrestricted 9,000 feet, QNH 1006.
Anyway, the flaps are retracted. So we'll take the runway turn-off light off. Same as well for the nose lights. We can disarm the spoilers. And just levelling off momentarily here at 5,000. We'll leave ourselves at 5,000 here. We're about to overfly Hong Kong itself. We've got the city there just down off the nose. So we'll stay low level just until we pass the city, then we'll continue the climb. Again, climbing stay up to flight level 370. In the meantime, we'll cycle the signs. Let the cam crew start working. So we've got Hong Kong Island just off the nose, and Kowloon out to the north of that. Using the Samseen Hong Kong scenery today, which is really rather good overall. Lots of nice details, you can see there, lots of boats down in the harbour. I doubt ordinarily in real life we'd be held down here at 5,000, but we might as well enjoy the scenery.
On Eastern 507, contact approach on 190 decimal 1.
Okay, so we'll assume we've been given a further climb now up to flight level 250.
Cathay 157, contact radar 132.15.
We've got 250, we'll push for a managed climb. And we do have climb 250 blue. We'll just leave the speed managed, so maintaining 250 knots for now. We'll accelerate obviously once we come through 10,000. So far the aircraft is fairly hit and miss in terms of its systems as well in terms of its automation, but again, as you can see, you can pretty much get the airframe from A to B. We've had no majorly unpleasant surprises so far. Again, the aircraft wanting to auto-rotate there during the takeoff, and then, as I said, surprisingly actually quite heavy on the stick there after that initial rotation. We've got Kai Tak down there on the left, the runway down there in the water. In real life, of course, that's obviously been closed, but modelled in the sim. We'll definitely have to fly an approach into there one day during a video.
Yeah, 246, reverse speed 230 knots.
246B at your discretion, maintain 90,000 feet traffic above.
So a nice little bit of scenery overall, as I say. The night lighting as well with the Samseen scenery is pretty excellent. Okay, it's just come up through 7,000 feet. Transition altitude we said was 9,000, so we'll just hold off on that. And we'll come out now on the range here on the nav display. So shortly going to be making another right turn out towards Waypoint Ocean. Again after that just flying a rough approximation of the Simbrief route out towards Waypoint Konga, then Mvar, and then you can see Tonga there is the start of the arrival in towards Taipei. They're a pretty short little hop for us overall. Up through 9,000. So we'll set standard here on the altimeters. We do have standard set. And cross-checked. As I say, pretty short sector for us. We're only going to be in the cruise for around 10-15 minutes. And we'll assume now we've been cleared up to cruise flight level 370. Be interesting to see whether or not the LVFR A340 can actually get us up to 370 in time. 340, I'm sure many of you are aware, in the real world is a pretty underpowered aircraft. Certainly during the departure there, it felt a little bit sporty, 20 degrees nose up and accelerating. So once more, this aircraft, not a perfect reflection of the real world airframe. There are quite a few differences, of course, between LVFR's A340 and the real aircraft. Anyway, we'll continue our climb here out over the Taiwan Strait. We'll take a brief look at the external model as we climb and continue here into the cruise. And as usual, on the shorter sectors within the sim, we'll come back just before top of descent, at which point we can get the aircraft set up and brief for the arrival.
Thai 606, when ready, descend to flight level 310, plan flight level 260 by Maple.
Descend, flight level 310, cancel level restriction by Maple Thai 606.
Air China H25 Hong Kong radar.
Radar, GS engineer 9026, landing flight level 250, heading 1404, 40 nautical miles.
China Southern 3039, climb to flight level 320.
Down to flight level 320.
Thai 606, continue descend to flight level 260, reach by Maple.
Tower 118.7 today. 120, report able right transition 9023, thank you.
India 246, climb to flight level 230.
Alpha level 230, Boeing 246.
China Eastern 507, descend 4,000 feet.
Descend 4,000 feet and due to weather require heading 270.
China Eastern 507, heading 270, approved.
So welcome back to the flight deck. Once again, after a very short stint there in the cruise, we are approaching our top descent point. In this particular case though, the LVFR A340 doesn't seem to have calculated a top of descent. I have seen the aircraft do so previously. I'm not sure why we're not showing one here. Also, according to the chart, we want to be flight level 290 at waypoint Boca. And currently the box there showing above 11,000. I tried to program in 290. As you can see, the box won't take any constraints there as well. So again, very much running on default systems overall. Anyway, we've got about 140 miles to run, and we need about 160 miles, just shy thereof, for the descent. So we're getting a little bit high now in terms of our profile. We'll get the aircraft coming down. We'll initially go down to flight level 200, and as I said, we're a little bit high, so we'll come into open descent. And we'll go select a speed here as well. We'll start cranking up the speed to allow us to increase our descent rate. So we'll go 275 for the time being. In terms of the setup here for the arrival, on the perf page, we'll input the conditions here at destination. So QNH is 1022. Temperature is 25 degrees and the wind currently 050, straight down the runway at 20 knots. Transition level for the arrival 130. And the MDA for the approach, we'll brief that in just a moment, but the MDA is 334. We're going to be using auto brake low for the landing here today. Just keep cranking up that speed. So coming down through 35,000 feet, that means we need about 140 miles to run. And now showing 135, so slowly coming back towards profile. We've got thrust idle.
On Nippon X513, descend 9,000 feet, QNH 1006.
So in terms of the briefing then for the arrival itself, joining via the Tonga 1 Alpha RNAV arrival as discussed earlier on, that is plate 20-2 Delta, it's an RNAV star. And again we have GPS primary. That brings us in via waypoint Tonga. Tracking out towards waypoint Bravo. We've got various speed and altitude restrictions on the way down. Not even going to attempt to use VNAV here for the arrival. Pretty sure the LVFR A340, again, essentially the default A320, not really up to the task. Quite a few of the constraints as well in the box are not accurate versus the chart itself. Ultimately, that's going to bring us in towards waypoint Jammy. And from Jammy, we're going to be joining in for the ILS onto runway 05 right. We might try a direct to in just a moment here as well, see how the aircraft handles that. The ILS itself, it's India Charlie Kilo Sierra 110.7. The final approach course is 054, aerodrome elevation 108 feet. As mentioned, we're going down to a Cat 1 MDA of 334, and the missed approach is climbing runway heading out towards 9.6 miles off the ILS, then making a left turn direct to waypoint Sedum, climbing up to 3,000 feet. In terms of the terrain, as you'll have seen on the previous chart, there is significant high terrain all down the eastern coastline of Taiwan. We're out over the water for now, but the MSA for the arrival is going to be 9,000 feet. In terms of the weather, again a very nice afternoon here in Taipei. A little bit more cloud cover than we saw in Hong Kong, slightly cooler here as well. Again the QNH 1022. And as mentioned, wind straight down the runway, so nice and easy for us here today. They're coming down through flight level 280. Means we need 120 miles or thereabouts, and currently showing 120, so nicely on profile now. And we're doing 3,200 feet per minute here in the descent. Ground speed's 400 knots, so we'll easily be able to maintain the profile. So planning to land on 05 right, vacating off to the left. We'll be using idle reverse, again auto brake low, which we did select. That seems to have dropped out. Not quite sure why that keeps dropping out. Doesn't seem as though I've tapped the brakes or anything.
Cathay 740, turn left heading 260.
So again, landing 05 right, vacating off at Sierra 7.
Left heading 260, Cathay 740.
The alternate today is Kaohsiung. For that we need 7.4 tons. I've also elected to take an extra 30 minutes of fuel here, not being too sure with how the LVFR fuel burn was going to behave. So we should be arriving with around 10 tons of fuel. Currently we've got about just shy of 14. So we're probably underburning slightly here versus the Simbury flight plan, but not by a significant amount. Certainly better to arrive with too much fuel rather than not enough. On that note, so far the aircraft actually reasonable in terms of its behaviour. Top of climb seemed about right, and so far as well, again the fuel burn not a million miles off. Certainly not hitting the numbers, I'm sure, but again, reasonable for the type of add-on that we're looking at here today. We'll continue the descent now down to flight level 110. And flight level 230. 92 miles we need now. So we're definitely getting a little bit low. We can come back into vertical speed. And we'll just go with a VS of minus 1,000 for now. Actually, given that we are low on profile here, it'd be interesting to put the aircraft into descent. See what it does there. No VDEV there on the PFD, so I'm not really sure whether the aircraft thinks we're high or low. It's actually putting us into a climb there, so again, behaviour is not great. And you can get away, I think, with using the aircraft on VATSIM, but you'd have to be very careful with what you're doing. Probably better off sticking with modes like VS for this sort of thing. Certainly there we shouldn't have gone into a climb. Anyway, that's it in terms of the briefing and the setup. Approaching 20,000 feet, we'll get the seatbelt signs on once again.
Cathay 740, speed 210 knots, descend 4,000 feet.
Outside air temperature just coming up on 2 degrees. We'll just hold the engine anti-ice for now. We might need that on here as we come down through the cloud layer. It will depend a little bit on the OT and as well our speed. So for now, continuing down to flight level 110. Again, transition altitude 130. And of course, as we approach 10,000 feet, we'll reduce the speed back towards 250 knots. Tracking for now, inbound towards waypoint Tonga, then on towards Boca. And as I said, perhaps once we're tracking inbound towards Taipei, we'll try direct to, before we come onto the ILS.
On the flight 513 heading 260, descend 6,000 feet.
Heading 260, descend 6,000, order flight 513.
China Eastern 507, reduce speed to 180 knots.
Reduce speed 180 knots. China Eastern 507.
Cathay 780, transducer approach 119, decimal 1.
119. Cathay 780.
Okay, so we're just coming down through the cloud. We are now over the mainland of Taiwan, and just coming down through 5,500 feet. We tried direct to Hukao, which did seem to work quite well, although it didn't draw accurately here on the nav display. To be expected again using the default A320 systems. One thing that did crop up though, the distance to run was completely inaccurate before, so actually we ended up fairly low here on the approach. That does now look to be reading a little bit more correctly, although we're still showing 30 miles to run to the runway versus 18 there on the ILS. We'll assume now we have been cleared for the localizer, so we'll arm that up. And we'll just keep the aircraft coming down below the glides. We'll just come back into open descent. We'll start reducing speed here as well.
Asia 967, reduce speed to 210 knots.
Reducing speed to 210 knots, China 967.
Green dot at the moment is 205, so we'll select that. And we'll activate the approach phase here as well. The approach phase is now activated, just getting a little bit higher on the glide. We've got plenty of time to correct. We'll just take a little bit of speed brake to help get the aircraft slowed down. So we've got thrust idle, coming back towards green dots, increasing our vertical speed, just coming down through 5,000 feet. The approach checks, the briefing is confirmed, ECAM status is checked. Seatbelts are on, barrier F we have a QNH of 1022. The MDA, we have an MDA of 334. And for the engine mode selector, that is set through to normal. That is the approach checklist complete. Airspeed's checked, we'll come through to flaps 1. Get rid of the speed brake here as well. And come back now towards 190. Just get ourselves back down below the glide slope, then we'll arm up the ILS.
Shandong 1152 departure, identify climb back to 7,000 feet.
And we'll continue the descent here down to 2,000 feet.
I'm doing 7,000, Shandong 152.
As soon as we capture the ILS, we can set the missed approach altitude. Again, that was 3,000. And you can see we are trending back here towards the glides. Having dragged the aircraft in, we're now intercepting from above. As a result of that low profile, we've also burned through quite a bit more fuel, so actually landing pretty reasonably close to what SimBrief had us planned with. Again, 10 tons on a normal profile. And we've got that extra 30 minutes, so we're still well above our 7.4 needed here for the diversion. We'll arm up the approach. We've got glide slope and loc, speed there as well. Come back towards 175 knots.
Land level 310, recap 236.
And we'll set the missed approach altitude, there's 3,000 feet. Another inaccuracy with the aircraft, we can't arm up both autopilots at the same time here to fly the ILS, so we've just got AP1. And speed check will come through now to flaps 2. Just holding the gear here for about another mile or so. Nicely visual now with the runway.
230,
Let's check 2500. Take the gear down. Take the runway turn off light on. Again, a little bit of an issue there with that click spot. There's light 3 to take off. We'll arm up the spoilers.
Turkey 43, turn left at 320.
And we'll come through now to 160 knots on the speed.
Passing for 260, heading 260, approach Thai 601.
So the aircraft doing a nice job so far flying the ILS, which is good to see.
Manito 605, reduce speed to 10 knots.
Through 7 miles. We'll take flaps 3.
Turkey 436, proceed to Iduma approved.
And just the flaps there to come on the ECAM memo. Looks like we do have 2 reds, 2 whites there on the PAPI as well. So the glide slope seems to concur there with the PAPI. And we'll come through to flaps full. Just hold 160 knots for now. You may have noticed there as well, there's a very small speed margin between BFE next to flaps 1 and green dot. Not entirely sure. Don't seem to recall that being accurate with the 340. Yeah, approaching 5 miles, we'll go manage speed. And the aircraft again, just not behaving correctly there, wanting to actually increase the speed. The approach 141, we'll have to set that manually. That does mean in the real aircraft we wouldn't get any protections from the ground speed mini function. Not going to be an issue for us here today. So for the landing checklist, cabin crew have been advised auto thrust is speed, auto brake low, ECAM memo is landing node blue. That is the landing checklist complete. So once more, quite a bit of man-handling required, quite a bit of user input required to get the aircraft where you want it to be, but as you can see, we have ultimately arrived here into Taipei on the ILS, looking good in terms of both profile and speed. Just about to approach 1,000 feet.
1,000.
And we are stable.
Shandong 1152, climb to flight level 6,900 meters, maintain 250 knots or less.
Slightly gloomier day here in Taipei. The landing may be interesting as well. I have found that you get pretty limited authority on the elevator during the flare. We'll see how we go. We'll disconnect the autopilot. Straight away there, the mode's not giving us what we should have. We should have glide slope still. We've gone into open climb.
Cathay 740, descend to 1,500 feet.
So the flight director's there not giving us what we want. We'll get rid of those. The thrust seems to be coming up here as well. The aircraft wanting to pitch up, so having to kill that. We'll get rid of the auto thruster as well. So the aircraft definitely letting us down a little bit here at the last minute, trying to put us into a climb, bring up the thrust to do so.
500.
Let's put us a little bit high here as well. That's checked 500. Still got one red there on the PAPI. Not sure what's going on there with the autopilot either. We've already disconnected. Showing land on the FMA.
100 above.
So a little bit disappointing there in the latter stages with the light guidance. And the aircraft feeling a little bit strange on the controls. Not that much response initially, and then quite twitchy all of a sudden as you put in a little bit more control input. Anyway, through the MDA, we'll land.
50. 40. 30.
Yeah, it's full
10,
backstick.
Retard.
And the aircraft now wanting to float. Let's touch down, we'll go full reverse. One thing I do really like is the touchdown and the rollout sounds, taxi sounds as well. Overall quite immersive, pretty well done. 370 knots, so we'll cancel the reverses. And we can start coming on the brakes here to vacate. Off on the left. So there you go guys, I do hope you enjoyed our outing in the LatinVFR Airbus A340-300. Clearly the aircraft is not without fault, although of course it is really the only A340 option we currently have available in the sim. I'm not going to run through a full breakdown of the product as I would usually do. Firstly, I did run through a fairly detailed breakdown on the LatinVFR A330, so you can refer to that video should you so wish. The two products, the two aircraft, are very similar overall in terms of what they offer. And secondly, once again, the 340, obviously fairly basic here in terms of its fidelity, so I don't think we need to spend 10 minutes breaking down the add-on. As I mentioned a couple of times throughout the video, the LatinVFR range of aircraft are obviously aimed at a certain type of simmer. Those of you who want a particular type of aircraft in the sim, but you're not too bothered about systems accuracy or functionality. As I've said many times before, personally I don't have any issue with lower fidelity aircraft, but of course they do need to be done to a certain standard. I think universally we all want high quality graphics, excellent sounds and a very immersive experience within the sim. At the moment with the LVFR A340, certainly more could be done graphically both in the cockpit and in the cabin. A greater level of attention to detail in some areas of the modelling and some higher fidelity, more accurate textures would certainly go a long way. The flight model of the aircraft is quirky to say the least. Again, not necessarily looking for total accuracy, but it would be nice to have an aircraft that is easy, pleasant to fly. I do find the flight model to be a minor improvement over the A330. For example, the aircraft is relatively much easier to land. But again, still getting that auto-rotate behaviour during the takeoff. The flight controls, as I said, felt initially unresponsive and then actually quite pitchy, quite twitchy through a certain range. The aircraft can be hand-flown, but for a 340 it does feel rather sporty. And as well, as we've said already, it does feel like you have to manhandle the 340 a little bit throughout the flight. Systems depth is obviously fairly basic, and again I think that is what LVFR is looking to offer. Buyer beware though, the default systems do certainly have their limitations. They can be pretty frustrating at times. As I mentioned, I think you could just about get away with using the aircraft on a VATSIM flight, but I'm not really sure it's the sort of aircraft you'd want to be using. The aircraft though does boast some modifications over the default systems. For example, we have the reworked fuel system with the appropriate amount of pumps, the trim tank, the auto trim transfer. You can also jettison fuel. In theory as well, we also have an automatically calculated top climb, top descent, but as we saw during our flight, those features are certainly not to be relied upon. Essentially, if you're happy with the default aircraft in general when it comes to systems modelling, you'll be okay with the LVFR A340, otherwise though, it's most likely a product that you'll want to avoid. The sounds on the aircraft are generally pretty decent. Overall I do find they give that level of immersion that we're looking for. Particularly nice I think are the included ground roll effects, much nicer actually than most other aircraft that I've come across in the sim. Nice additional features included with the onboard tablet. For example, we do have Navigraph integration, as well external fixtures and fittings that you'll have seen throughout the video. That being said, as mentioned, personally I can get the Navigraph integration to work, and once more I presume that's as a result of previously having set things up with the LVFR A330. In short, this is now the second LVFR aircraft that I purchased, and I would like to see a higher level of polish with the add-ons ahead of release. Certainly there's no excuse for some of the more glaring modelling errors, for example. I think lastly it is worth noting that after my review of the LatinVFR A340-300, the company did actually reach out to me asking whether or not I would like to help as a consultant with the project. Unfortunately, I did have to decline as I simply don't have the time available to do so, but I think it really goes to demonstrate that they are genuinely looking to improve their products as and where they can. So hopefully at some point we'll see them just pause a little bit on development, take stock of the add-ons they currently have available, and polish things up on their existing add-ons where needed. Once again, ladies and gents, I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider giving it a like. If you want to see more content from the channel, then please do consider subscribing as well. And if you'd like to help support the channel further, you can do so by becoming a channel member or patron. I'll leave a link to both of those down in the video description below. Once more, a very big thank you to my channel members and patrons for all of your support. It is very much appreciated. And to all of you, I hope you are having a great day wherever you are. Take really good care, and I will see you all again soon.